Before we dive in, what time is it where you are and where are you listening from? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. I used to think silence was the worst thing a family could give you. I was wrong. Sometimes silence is the only honest thing left. My name is Sloane. I'm 31 years old. I drive a 2009 Honda Civic with a crack in the dashboard that I keep meaning to fix, and for the better part of a decade, my family treated me like a problem they hadn't figured out how to solve yet. This is the story of the day that changed. My brother's rehearsal dinner was held at a restaurant called Harlow's, the kind of place where the menu doesn't have prices, and the bread arrives in a little linen basket, like it's precious cargo. My sister-in-law's family had chosen it. Of course they had. I almost didn't go. I'd been working a double shift at the hospital that week. I'm a sonographer, which means I spend most of my days in dark rooms pressing a wand against strangers' stomachs and watching for things that shouldn't be there. It's quiet work. I like quiet work. I'm good at it, but it doesn't look impressive at a dinner table, and in my family, looking impressive at a dinner table is basically a competitive sport. My older brother, the groom, is a corporate attorney. My younger sister just made partner at her marketing firm at 28. My mother volunteers on 3 nonprofit boards and never lets anyone forget it. My father retired early from a career in commercial real estate and spends most of his time now telling other people what they should have done with their money. And then there's me, Sloane, who rents an apartment, who didn't finish her MBA, who takes the train to work because parking downtown costs more than her electric bill. I parked 2 blocks from Harlow's because the valet was $30. I fixed my lipstick in the rearview mirror, told myself it didn't matter what anyone said, and went inside. The dining room was already full when I arrived. Long table, white tablecloths, little votives flickering. My brother caught my eye from across the room and waved. His fiancée, who is perfectly nice, gave me a smile that was also perfectly nice. I found my place card between my aunt on one side and a cousin I barely knew on the other. My mother leaned over before I'd even sat down. "You look tired," she said. "Not hello. Not glad you made it. Just an observation delivered like a verdict." "Long week," I said. "You should really think about a different schedule. The night shifts are aging you." I picked up my water glass and took a long sip. The appetizers came. Conversation moved around the table in the way it always does at these things. Safe topics, loud laughter, the occasional jab dressed up as a joke. My father asked my brother about a case he was working on. My sister described a campaign she'd landed. A tech company, significant budget. She was very pleased. Everyone nodded and asked follow-up questions. Nobody asked me anything. That's not self-pity, by the way. That's just how it was. There's a difference between being invisible and being ignored, and what I experienced at that table was the second one. They knew I was there. They just didn't find me interesting. Then my cousin, he's 26, newly graduated from business school, very proud of both facts, leaned across the table with the particular energy of someone who thinks he's about to say something charming. "Sloane, are you still taking the train to work?" Half the table heard it. I saw my mother's expression shift. Not embarrassment exactly, more like the look you give a child who has just said something awkward at a dinner party. "I am," I said. "Huh." He picked up his fork. "I just couldn't do it. The commute alone would kill me. But I guess it works if you're not—" He paused, smiled, "you know, car shopping." My sister laughed. Not a mean laugh, I want to be fair. More like a, "oh, this is a little awkward" laugh, which somehow made it worse. My father didn't look up from his bread. My mother said Sloane has always been very practical, in the tone people use when practical means limited. I didn't say anything. I cut my salad into smaller pieces, and I chewed and I swallowed and I thought about the thing I was carrying in my bag. I should back up. 6 weeks before that dinner, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. A woman named Ms. Hartley, an estate attorney in Columbus. She asked if I was Sloane Vickers, granddaughter of one Margaret Vickers. I said yes. She told me my grandmother had passed 3 months earlier. I knew this already. I had been at the funeral, and that the estate had taken some time to process because of the nature of certain assets. I remember sitting down on my kitchen floor when she said the next part. Not dramatically. I just needed to sit down. My grandmother, who everyone in the family called Grandma Midge, who made the same green bean casserole every Thanksgiving and kept butterscotch candies in a crystal dish by the front door, and drove a 1998 Ford Taurus until the transmission gave out. My Grandma Midge had left me her house, not just the house in Springfield where she'd lived since the 1970s. The other property. The one in her name that nobody had talked about. 42 acres outside of Ashland, Ohio. Land that a regional solar development company had been quietly trying to acquire for 7 years. Land that, per the offer letter Ms. Hartley attached to the email she sent me that evening, was now worth just under $1.2 million. There was a letter with it, handwritten on her stationery with the little violets at the top. Sloane, it said. You used to sit with me in the garden when you were small and you never needed me to explain anything. You just watched. I always thought that was a kind of knowing that the rest of them hadn't found yet. This land has been waiting for the right person. I think you're her. Don't let anyone make it into something it isn't. Grandma Midge, I read it 4 times. Then I put it back in the envelope and I made myself a cup of tea and I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents, not my brother or my sister, not my friends. Nobody. I don't know exactly why I kept it quiet for those 6 weeks. Partly I needed to understand what I was looking at. I hired my own attorney, a woman I found through my hospital's employee legal assistance program, and I spent 2 weeks going through every document. Partly I wanted to think about the land itself, what Grandma Midge had meant by don't let anyone make it into something it isn't, whether I should sell or hold or look into the development offer more carefully. But if I'm being honest with myself, there was another reason. A smaller, less flattering one. I wanted to know what it felt like to carry something that big and not need anyone to see it. I wanted to find out if I could just be myself for a little while longer before everything shifted. So I went to my brother's rehearsal dinner with the offer letter folded in my bag, not to show anyone, just because it had been sitting on my kitchen counter and I hadn't moved it. After the salad, after the cousin's comment, after my mother's very practical, the table moved on. Someone mentioned interest rates. Someone else mentioned a vacation. My brother started talking about the honeymoon itinerary, and everyone leaned in. I was looking at the votive candle in front of me when my father's sister, my Aunt Patricia, who I've always liked because she says what she thinks and then moves on, touched my arm. "How are you really?" she said, low enough that it was just for me. "I'm okay. You seem far away. Just tired." She looked at me for a second longer than necessary. "Your grandmother always said you were the one who paid attention to things," she said. I think she was right. I nodded and looked back at my candle. Later, dessert. Chocolate lava cake, and apparently you were supposed to be impressed by how the center ran. My sister was telling a story about a client dinner in New York. Something about a rooftop and a misdelivered expense report, and everyone was laughing, and then my cousin, I cannot explain what possessed him, circled back. "Sloane, I'm serious. You should let me help you look at cars. I know a guy at the Audi dealership in Kenwood. He could get you into something reasonable. What's your budget? Like 15, 20? He meant $15,000 to $20,000. As in, he was assuming I couldn't manage more than that. He wasn't being cruel. He genuinely believed he was being helpful. That's almost harder to deal with." My mother looked at her dessert. My father did the thing where he adjusts his watch band. My sister said, "That's sweet of you," to my cousin, and the conversation might have moved on, but then something happened that I didn't plan for. My Aunt Patricia, who had been quiet for most of dinner, looked at my cousin and said pleasantly, "Actually, I'm not sure Sloane needs help with that." My cousin blinked. "Oh?" "Midge left her the Ashland property," my aunt said. She looked at me, something careful and kind in her eyes. "I assume the offer from that solar company is still on the table." The table went quiet. Not the way it goes quiet when someone says something inappropriate. The other kind. The kind where everyone recalibrates at the same time. My mother looked at me. My father looked at me. My brother put down his fork. My sister, who had been mid-reach for the chocolate sauce, went still. My cousin said, "What property?" My aunt said, 42 acres, Ashland County." She looked at my mother. Midge talked about it when she updated her will. I thought you all knew. They didn't know. I could see it. My mother's expression cycled through 4 or 5 things in the span of about 2 seconds. My father's face did something I'd never seen it do before, which was nothing. Just nothing. Like the signal dropped. My brother said, "Sloane," and then didn't finish the sentence. I reached into my bag. I don't know why I did it. The offer letter was right there, and I took it out and I set it on the table next to my dessert plate, face down, without a word, like I was simply putting something away, like it was incidental. My cousin reached for it. "Don't," my Aunt Patricia said, and he didn't. I looked at my mother. She was looking at the envelope. "Why didn't you say anything?" she asked. Her voice was different, quieter. I thought about all the things I could say. I thought about the train comment and the aging you and the very practical and 14 years of dinners like this one. I didn't think it was relevant, I said. That night I drove home in the Honda Civic with the cracked dashboard. I sat in the parking lot of my building for a few minutes before going in. The radio was playing something old, something I recognized from my grandmother's kitchen, and I turned it up a little. I thought about what she'd written. "You just watched?" I always thought that was a kind of knowing. I thought about the way my father's face had gone blank, my mother's voice going quiet, my cousin's hand stopping halfway to the envelope. Here's what I want to say about that moment. Because I think it matters, it didn't feel the way I expected it to. I'd imagined, in some small corner of my mind, that it would feel like winning, like finally being seen. Like the part in the story where the wronged party gets to stand up and say, Look at what you missed." It didn't feel like that. It felt like standing in the garden with my grandmother when I was 7 years old, the two of us watching a bird neither of us could name, and her saying, "You don't have to know what it is to know it's something." It felt like a door closing gently, not slamming. It felt like the end of needing something I hadn't known I was still waiting for. I want to be clear about what came after, because I think these things matter more than the dramatic moment does. I did not sell the Ashland property to the solar development company. Not because I'm opposed to the project, I spent 2 months researching it, but because I wanted more time to understand what I was holding. I hired an agricultural consultant named Graham, who was thorough and direct and does not waste my time. We are still in that process. My parents called me the following Sunday. My mother talked for a long time about how the family should have been told, about communication, about how my grandmother used to worry about me. She said this like it was a concern rather than a grievance. I let her talk. My father said, near the end, "Your grandmother always had a high opinion of you." "I know," I said. "I think she was right to." I didn't know what to do with that. I still don't entirely. It was the most he'd said to me in years that wasn't wrapped in a qualifier. My brother texted me separately, "I'm sorry about the rehearsal dinner, the car stuff. That wasn't fair." I wrote back, "It's okay, congratulations again." And I meant both things. My cousin, the Audi dealership one, sent a long message that was mostly about him and his intentions and how he hadn't meant anything by it. I responded with a thumbs up emoji, which I know sounds cold, but was actually the kindest thing I could manage that day. My Aunt Patricia and I have had coffee 3 times since then. She's become someone I talk to now, really talk to, in the way I didn't know I was missing. The hardest part of this whole story isn't what you'd think. It's not the rehearsal dinner or the offer letter or my cousin's hand going still above the envelope. The hardest part is this. My grandmother knew what she was doing when she left that land to me. She'd watched this family for decades. She knew exactly what the land was worth, financially and otherwise. She chose me not to punish anyone, but because she trusted me with something she'd spent 50 years tending to. And I spent the first 6 weeks after getting her letter half convinced I wasn't ready for it. That's the real story, not the silence at the table, not my father's expression, the question of whether I could grow into what she saw in me. I think I'm trying. The garden at the Ashland property, which I visited for the first time in April, has 2 old apple trees at the back edge of the lot, unpruned and wild-looking, the kind that grow how they want to. Graham says they're probably 60 years old. He says they still fruit every fall. I stood under them for a long time. I didn't need to explain anything to myself. I just watched. And before you go, what time is it where you are? Where are you listening from? Tell me in the comments. I really do read them. If the story hit you somewhere familiar, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you're new here, welcome to LD Family Drama. There are more stories where this one came from. I've thought a lot about why my grandmother chose me. Not in a self-congratulatory way, more like turning a rock over in your hand, trying to understand the weight of it. She had other grandchildren. My brother is sharp, accomplished, the kind of person rooms naturally organize themselves around. My sister moves fast and wins things. By every visible measure, they were the obvious choices. And yet Grandma Midge sat down at some point, probably at her kitchen table, probably with a cup of coffee going cold beside her, and wrote my name on that document. I used to think people got what they deserved in some neat automatic way. That hard work always surfaces, that kindness always comes back around, that the truth eventually just shows itself. I don't think that anymore. Not exactly. Life is messier than that. Good people get overlooked. Difficult people get rewarded. Teaming matters in ways that have nothing to do with merit. But here's what I do believe. The choices you make when nobody is watching, those compound. Not magically, not immediately. Just slowly, the way interest does, the way a tree grows. My grandmother watched me for 30 years. She watched me show up to her house when I didn't have anything impressive to report. She watched me sit with her in the garden without needing to fill the silence. She watched me handle disappointment without turning it into bitterness, at least most of the time. Those weren't grand gestures, they were just how I was. And somehow, across decades, that added up to something she trusted. That's the causality I keep coming back to. Not punishment for my cousin's joke or my mother's comment about aging. Not a reward handed down from somewhere. Just a woman who paid attention over a long time and made a decision based on what she saw. The outcome wasn't fate. It was just the result of who I'd been, accumulated. What I'm still working on, and I want to be honest about this, is the intelligence piece, not book intelligence, not credentials, the kind that comes from genuinely paying attention to things. Grandma Midge had it. She could read a situation, a person, a piece of land, without needing anyone to explain it to her. I think I have some of that. I think I've been underusing it because for a long time I was so focused on not being embarrassed at family dinners that I forgot to think seriously about what I actually wanted. The Ashland property forced me to think seriously. 42 acres don't wait for you to feel ready. An offer letter doesn't care about your self-doubt. I had to learn, fast, what questions to ask and who to trust and when to move slowly and when to stop moving entirely. That's still ongoing. I'm still learning, but I'm not afraid of the size of it anymore. And the resilience, I used to mistake that for stubbornness, for just enduring things. What I understand now is that real resilience isn't about getting through hard moments. It's about not letting the hard moments rewrite who you are. My family spent years, not maliciously but consistently, suggesting I was less than I was. The dangerous thing isn't that they said it. The dangerous thing is how easy it is to start agreeing. I almost did, in small ways, without noticing. Grandma Midge's letter was partly a reminder that someone who knew me well had reached a very different conclusion. I stood under those apple trees in April and I didn't feel like I'd won anything. I felt like I was finally starting to catch up to what she saw in me. That's enough to work with.